All right, let's get into it. We'll start with a half butterfly. Many of my sequences start with this posture. I think it's a good way to start a yin practice. So right leg is straight, left foot to the inside of the thigh. And we're looking for a stretch back here, the back of the right thigh. Okay, so just let the upper body relax. I don't recommend grabbing your foot. And feel free to use support. So if you have some blocks at home, you can use those. Yoga blocks support your knee, your forearms, your forehead. Otherwise, just let gravity take over. We'll be here for 5 minutes. Okay, so we'll switch sides here. Half butterfly, side 2. We're doing 2 things here in this posture. One is stretching the hamstring, and we're also decompressing the low back. So be sure that your back can round, and you may or may not feel a stretch back here, or it may be comparatively mild compared to what you're feeling in your thigh. That's to be expected. That's pretty normal. All right, let's take a short break. We'll rebound. So as I've mentioned in the past, often during the rebound we can feel the joints more. So I'm feeling my spine more as I relax back. I feel my back. While I was in the pose, it was mostly the hamstrings that I felt. And again, that's pretty normal, to be expected. Of course, your experience may be different, so please don't think that you necessarily will experience the same thing I will. I think most people probably will, but just because you don't, it's not necessarily a reason for concern. But if, yes, you're feeling a lot of pain or a lot of sensation, or you're concerned about an injury, then we may need to talk about your experience and what you can do about it. All right, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze. We just shake out that last set. It's a little bit of movement. The movement is designed to just rebalance everything, kind of get rid of the stuck sensations or the leftover sensations. They may not all disappear. So I'm definitely not able to get rid of all of it, but I feel a lot better after moving a little bit. It's pretty normal again. Okay, so we'll do a cattail next. Let's see. We take the left leg and bring it straight up, and we'll drop that all the way over to the right. Let me pull this receiver out of my pocket. There we go. And we'll take that top leg, move it, or sorry, the bottom leg, move it back. So that's your right leg. Prop our head up on the hand and elbow, at least to start. And then we bend the knee, grab the foot, pull the heel in towards the buttocks, and we want to feel stretch at the front of the thigh. Okay, and you have two options, pull the foot in or potentially kick it back, but still holding the foot, okay? Now, this front leg could be straight or bent. I'm going to bend it, I think, today. Generally, the straighter the leg is and the closer to your face it is, the more intense that stretch will be. With the knee bent, it's less intense, and with the leg down, away from your face, it's less intense. So you can decide. Some people have really, really tight quads and hip flexors. In fact, a lot of people do. And so this can be a very intense, challenging posture for some folks, actually. I have pretty open quads, at least, and I think hip flexors as well. And so I don't, it feels okay. I feel the stretch, but it's not super intense for me by any means. Now, a few things to explore here are, what are you doing with your head? Is it up on your hand like I've got it? Or many people prefer this, which is fine. You can do that. Rest your head on the ground on a folded blanket or pillow. If you've got a pillow at home, you could do that. The shoulder. So this is the first of two twists. It may not look like a twist, but it is. My pelvis is facing the ground, so I don't really want to be doing that. Okay, so I'm leaning back at least a little bit. And then the more you lean back, the deeper the twist will be. And it's also our back bend. This is our only back bend in today's class. So the more you lean back, the more you are bringing your spine into extension as well. And I think that brings us to a good point, or an important point, which is what I mentioned. We're stacking postures today. I mentioned that at the beginning. And when we stack postures, we rarely get our we rarely work a part of our body in an ideal way. So, is this your deepest back bend, your favorite back bend? Probably not. It's actually a very good quad stretch. So I'd say, is this your best quad stretch? It might be. Excuse me. It might actually be a really effective quad stretch for you. I use this often to isolate the quads. Is this your deepest twist? I'd say that probably depends. I did have a student once who really felt nothing in most spinal twists, but this one he did. And so he would often substitute this in class for other twists that we would do. So my point is, excuse me, that we have a quad stretch, a back bend, and a twist. Is it the best back bend, quad stretch, and twist? Probably not. I doubt anyone would say, yeah, this is my deepest twist. It's my deepest and best and most enjoyable back bend, and it's the most effective quad stretch for me. I would suspect maybe somebody who reported that, oh, this is my deepest twist, I love it, they might report that it's like ineffective as a quad stretch or too painful or something. A lot of times our bodies are like that, so if we're, getting something unusual out of a posture that maybe most other people don't, then that also might mean that we're not enjoying some of the same benefits that other people might enjoy in that posture. And I think the way a lot of people reactively think is in terms of better or worse. Well, is that good? Is that bad? Am I weird because I'm not feeling the same thing? It's kind of the wrong way of thinking of things, in my opinion. All right, let's go ahead and unwind from that. And let's take a moment on the back. I'm going to turn so I can continue facing the camera, but just lay back on your back for a moment. Feel both thighs. What do you feel? So for me, my right thigh feels much more alive. It feels warmer, like it's tingly. If I take a breath, I feel that thigh. It's like the breath is moving through that thigh. My left thigh, by comparison, feels kind of dull, asleep, like it's not there as much. I don't feel it as much. I'm not as aware of it. Again, if I take a breath, I don't feel the breath as much moving through that part of my body, if you will. So I like to demonstrate that from time to time experientially for people so that they can begin to understand what the yogis were talking about when they talked about subtle energy and the breath. Okay, let's bring that right leg up, drop it over, take the left leg back, move it back, and then bend the knee and grab the foot. Okay, so if you've studied yoga at all, or you've had yoga teachers that talk about subtle energy at all, then you may be aware of the word prana. In Taoism, the word is chi, but they're both talking about the same thing. And so subtle energy, prana and chi both also translate as breath. The closest word that I found in Western, the Western vocabulary is spirit. And spirit actually used to also mean breath. So it's kind of interesting that many, many ancient peoples had this association of breath, spirit, sort of a spiritual aspect. Because again, if we just, we can get very woo-woo about it, and we can get very metaphysical about it, but we can also think in very simple terms, right? Our human experience is there's certain very common things to human beings. So if we just think for a moment, a human being, if they're alive, they're breathing. If they're dead, they're not. It's like we don't have to get into metaphysics. We don't need science and medicine to tell us that. We don't need weird spiritual conceptions. It's pretty simple. If a human being is alive, she is breathing. When she stops breathing, she is dead. That's end of the story. So again, thinking of if we begin to conceptualize, we'll take my father, for instance. He passed away the beginning of the pandemic. And, if I took his body after he passed away, that's not my father, right? But materially speaking, it is, right? That was when those cells, that physical thing showed up. I would say, "Hey, Dad," and I would talk with him, whatever. But because something has left, it's not my father anymore. It's a corpse. I could say my father's body or whatever. We can put it in the ground somewhere, and I can go and talk to that body, but that's just a representation, a physical representation of what was my father. My father was whatever was in that body, right? The breath, the energy, the memories, the beliefs, if you will, and all of that has left that body. So I hope that makes sense. When that breath left him, when his breath left him, all of those things that I love about him went away. And then I was just left with this corpse. And if we just left the corpse to nature, eventually that would dissolve. So the things that were holding those cells together and his physical form together has also left, right? Same with me. Like, as long as I'm alive and I have breath, then this physical form, as long as it's fed and taken care of, relatively speaking, this physical form will sustain itself. Once the breath leaves me, then this physical form will no longer sustain itself. You can give it food, you can give it medicine, but it will no longer sustain itself. It will no longer be able to sustain itself. So you can see how ancient peoples associated breath with this idea of like spirit or soul, that whatever it is that makes you you leaves your body when your breath leaves, right? That's, again, it's a pretty simple concept. You can understand why people in different parts of the world would come up with very simple ideas. We in the West, with all of our science and medicine and technology, we may no longer believe these things or understand these things, but they're really not that foreign, or they're not that out there if we think about it. It's pretty simple. Okay, let's unwind back onto our back. We'll just rebound for a moment. So again, just comparing both thighs. While the one I just stretched feels a little different than the other one, overall they feel much more similar now. So you can see, even though it's not just the immediate effect, right? The immediate after effect, because as this one sort of settles, they feel more the same. So there's a lasting effect to what we did. It's not just, oh, I feel it and then I don't. Like if I were to pinch my finger, oh, I feel it and then I stop. I don't feel the sensation anymore, right?
So this isn't just the immediate after effect. There's a lasting effect that I can feel. Okay, let's bring the legs in, give them a little squeeze. And then we'll hinge up. Okay, this next one might be the most challenging set for some of you anyway. It is for me, I know. It just kind of depends on your body type. Again, this is half dragonfly. So we take the legs nice and wide, straight, okay? And then what we'd like to do is fold over the left leg. I'm not mirroring here, so you're probably going to be going in the opposite direction of me. So we reach down, grab the foot. We're looking for a stretch here and a stretch here. Again, today's sequence, we have two areas we are trying to target, okay? So most of you, or I won't even say that, some of you will have to roll the right shoulder back like I'm doing to feel both, okay? And I'll just say again, because we are stacking today, then we likely, well, some people will only be able to generate one or the other. So you might feel like your hip or your waist is stretching, but you don't feel the leg. Or you might feel the opposite, like, okay, I can feel a stretch in my leg, but I don't feel my waist and ribs. So I'm just acknowledging that that might be the case for you. So it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean you can fix it. Just again, certain body types that will just be your experience, no matter how hard you try. You just will only feel one, and that's okay. So I want to continue talking a little bit about the subtle energy, again, chi, prana, spirit, this conception or this idea. So what the yogis and Taoists noticed was that certain things changed the way the breath felt in their body. Now, I'll invite you right now, if you like, to take a really full, deep breath in and out, and notice if you can feel the areas you're stretching change. The sensations change as you take that breath. So if you take a nice deep breath in and out, if you're feeling your waist or the inside of your thigh or both, right? The inhale feels different than the exhale. See if you can feel that. There's just a subtle difference in the quality. And it's the areas that we are stretching the most that our attention goes to. At least that's my experience. That's where I can feel the breath most acutely. Now again, with a modern scientific conception, we can sort of explain this away, you might say, in a sense. We can try trivializing that, right? So the Western perspective, modern scientists would be like, oh, well, that's just because you've stretched your fascia, your connective tissue, tight, and your connective tissue is continuous throughout your body. Like all of it's connected to everything else, including your lungs. So even though it may not seem obvious to you when you take a deep breath in, you're sort of pulling on this continuous web throughout your body. And as you pull on that, you actually can feel it potentially all the way to your toes and your fingertips. So depending on the position of your body, how deep your breath is, your level of embodiment, your level of awareness of what's going on in your body, and various other factors. Sometimes it's good to be in a very relaxed state, actually, and you can sort of feel that in-breath and out-breath, the difference, even in your toes, even in your ears, your earlobes, right? It's just like every part of your body is actually alive and connected. And so if you're new to yoga or you're new to being aware of what's going on in your body, you may not be able to. So again, don't discount your own experience. But most people with practice and, over time as they begin to feel into their body more with yoga, they can feel their breath throughout their body. They can feel that subtle shift of inhale and exhale. They may not know why or what that means, but they can just feel that there's a something happening that they can feel throughout their body as they breathe in and out.
Let's switch sides. Whew. So like I said, that's an intense one for me. Definitely feeling that here. Okay, side 2. Okay, so we're looking for a stretch here and here, both if we can. And then again, if you can only do one, that's okay. So the conception that the Taoists and the yogis came up with, they came up with very similar ideas about what chi or prana and the breath meant. Now, I do want to be clear because it's easy to get confused, so I'll try and clear things up a little bit in case this is something you're interested in and it is something you begin to sort of think about. Both the Taoists and the yogis use that word, so in Taoism, chi, in yoga, prana, to talk about the breath and then also subtle energy in the body. And then again, sometimes it also was actually conceived of as sort of your spirit or your soul. Like, if I were to again speak about my father, where is his spirit now? Where is his soul? Did that survive his physical death or not, right? There's this concept that we have, many of us. So if you're, say, a Christian, you may have this concept that his soul or his spirit has left his body and it will be, his life will be judged by God, and then he'll either be allowed into heaven or he'll be sent down to hell, right? So these are, again, very familiar ideas. Most of us have encountered an idea like that something, when we die, leaves the body. Now, some people don't necessarily believe in heaven and hell, or in addition to heaven and hell, they believe in rebirth. So there are actually indications that in many early Christian schools, and some people cite passages like in the Bible, whatever, that it seems like in Jesus's time in early Christianity, they also believed in reincarnation. And another thing is in Buddhism and Hinduism, and I think in Taoism as well, there are conceptions of a heaven and a hell. Actually, some of them have conceptions of several heavens and hells. So depending on, because in, I think, modern Christian conception, it's like heaven or hell, that's it. It's like, were you good or bad? Did you believe in Jesus or not? That's it. End of story. That's where you go. But if you think about it, right, some people are really good. They're really good people and they do great things. And then other people they're good most of the time, but occasionally they're maybe not so good. They've done some things. There are other people who are horrible.
And then there are people who've just, mass murderers. They've killed tons of people. So, you can think about maybe it's not just one or the other. Maybe actually it makes sense that if we're taking people after death and putting them somewhere based on how good or bad they were, that maybe there would be some gradation there. It's not all or nothing. A great show, if you're looking for a show to watch and you haven't watched or read it yet, is The Good Place. It's a really funny show, and it's sort of explores this idea of heaven and hell and good and bad. I think in a really clever, funny, and interesting way. It's actually, I've studied philosophy before, and there's a character in there who's a philosophy professor, and it's actually quite sophisticated in its treatment of a lot of things. So even though it's a comedy and there's a lot of maybe kind of crude jokes in it, there's actually a level of sophistication to it as well that's quite interesting. And again, there's all these sort of ideas that are explored in a fun, entertaining way. So I think that's what makes it so rich. Okay, let's go ahead and come on out of that one. Make our way onto our back and relax for a moment. Okay, let's bring our legs in, shake it out a bit. And then we'll take the left knee over the right. Make sure you know your left and your right. Okay, left over right. Now listen carefully down to the left, which is probably you're wanting to do that, but we're going to go to the left, and that's called twisted roots. Okay, so pretty deep, intense twist, at least for certain body types. Feel free to play around with the leg position and the arm position. You could put something under your knees if necessary, but I just let them dangle in the air. Same with my shoulder. My shoulder's off the ground a little bit. So, you might say, I'm bringing my knees and my shoulder toward the ground. If I could, I would touch the ground with both, but I can't. So that's generating a stretch here, okay? So in the Taoist and yogic conception of qi and prana, it meant breath, so your actual breath, like breathing in and out. It also denoted many different types of energy that runs through the body and maybe even through the cosmos. So they, both in the yoga tradition and the Taoist tradition, there were different names for the different types of energy that would run through the body. So the yogis thought that maybe an energy that might cause you to cough might be different than the energy that you use to go to the bathroom, for instance. I'm being very crude, but I'm just trying to give you examples that we can relate to. So in the yogic tradition, there were what's called the vayus, which are the winds. Vayu means wind. And there's said to be a kind of upward wind and a downward wind and just different energies. So like I said, cough might be an upward movement of energy, whereas going to the bathroom, a downward movement or energy. And they thought that these postures that we do, along with breathing techniques and various
meditative techniques could manipulate these energies. We could bring energy up, we could bring it down, we could circulate it around, we can do all kinds of things. So the postures a lot of times were designed to, as we're feeling, hopefully in today's class, release tension from the physical body, because physical tension can disrupt that flow, that energy. So like I had you do in the rest between the cattails, a cattail pose, is hopefully you could feel like, oh, if I take a breath, yes, I can feel it moving through my thigh more readily through the one that I stretched versus the thigh that I didn't stretch. And you can begin to see how, again, these people who didn't have all these sophisticated, machines, and they weren't pulling apart the body with dissections and all this stuff. They just began to get a sense of like what's going on in the body. Oh, I stretch a part of my body, and then when I take a breath, I can feel that part of the body more easily. So they began to conceive that, okay, the breath, the subtle energy. So again, even though the breath and subtle energy are not the same, okay, so again, there are subtle energies that are moving throughout the cosmos, you might say, and the body, that aren't just the physical breath. So the physical breath is related with them, very intimate, but it's not considered necessarily the same exact thing. But you can sense, okay, I take a deep breath, I feel that part of my body. You can begin to see where they were conceiving, okay, so the energy, I stretch my body, and the energy moves more freely, right? And that's a good thing, because the energy can, if the energy can go someplace, then that area can heal and it becomes more alive and more vital. And you can understand their conception, how they began to conceive of these practices and these techniques. All right, let's switch sides. So on this side, right knee over the left, and then down to the right. So again, that might double check. Even though I say that when I teach in person, there's almost always somebody in the class doing it wrong still. So you just want to like double, triple check yourself. So it's interesting as modern people, because we can take those conceptions and ideas of the yogis and the Taoists, and we can just like potentially laugh, right? There's no wind moving through my body. All these complicated names and ideas that they gave to things, we can just sort of like, that's a bunch of superstition. They were totally wrong. There are little cells running around, and there's blood moving around. And by the way, blood is one form of qi that the Taoists recognize. So blood, lymph, bodily fluids, those are seen as one type of subtle energy. It's not the only kind. But it's interesting because sometimes, again, we hear these terms and we start to think of these really far out there metaphysical conceptions of, things that we'll never experience or see. But again, I think in reality, a lot of these things are much less far out than some people may lead us to believe. People who haven't experienced these things firsthand and just maybe have read it in a book and then gone out and tried to teach it to other people, they don't know that this is something you can actually kind of experience for yourself. Same with what we call the chakras as well, in my experience. These, we can create a very metaphysical sort of theory or idea about the chakras, and in my experience, that is not very helpful. But if we think about our human experience, almost all of us have experienced a contraction in our belly. Almost all of us have felt an ache in our heart. Almost all of us have maybe gotten up in front of a crowd to speak and felt like a dryness or constriction in our throat. So again, we can get really far out there and talk about lotuses and the number of petals on a lotus and a chakra and its color and, you know, all this stuff. And that might be helpful for some people some of the time. But in my experience, often what happens is it's so far out there and so far from our everyday experience that we just end up thinking of it as like a superstition, like a nice story, rather than something that's rooted in our human experience that we all experience, and that if we can come to understand, might actually be useful or helpful for us. So this is what I'm trying to do with this idea of chi and prana. So regardless of whether or not the Taoist or the yogic theory of how chi or prana works, like what's going on, again, we may not understand or resonate with the cultural and temporal symbols they used. What's interesting is as we begin to study these techniques with modern science and medicine, they work. They work. Many doctors are recommending yoga for various things. Okay, meditation is all the rage now. Everyone has a meditation app on their phone. Okay, so it's interesting because in the West, we very much want to say, oh, that's superstition. Oh, you know, vital winds moving through the body. Oh, that's just BS. Prana, chi, pff. But why do the techniques that they developed using these theories, why do they work? Why does acupuncture work? Acupuncture works for many things, especially pain relief. And we can't explain why using Western theory yet. We may eventually develop our own theories and ideas of why these things work. But it's interesting to just note that theories and ideas that most Westerners want to take and put in the trash bin and say that's superstitious BS, why do they yield results that work? It's interesting. All right, let's unwind. And then you can give your legs a little shake out. So there's a lot more I could say on that subject. It's a very deep subject. I don't by any means want you to think that, you know, I'm giving you some kind of in-depth overview of subtle energy. I was just hopefully trying to give you a little bit of an experience where you could feel and maybe begin to say, oh, okay, maybe that's, you know, that's what they're talking about. This sensation that I feel, the change in the way my body feels after I stretch it. Yes, my body feels more open, more relaxed, more vital. That's something I can sense. And so again, yogis and Taoists would have ascribed this to a change in the balance and flow of this subtle energy through your body. We in the West, again, we might talk about, you know, cells and lymph flow and blood flow. It's fine. And these are different ways of, again, describing our human experience. Do I think the yogis were wrong and science is right? It's not the way I think. I think these are just different ways of looking at the same thing. This is why I think both modern science can be right about something and ancient yogic theory and Taoist theory can also be right about things, because they're just both ways of looking at this human experience and understanding it. It's not that one being right makes the other wrong. They can both be right. All right, let's relax for a few minutes. Coming onto your back in what in yin we call a pentacle, so just making yourself really comfy. If you have a phone there, set it for 6 minutes is what I recommend. And just let go for 6 minutes, relax in stillness.